Good morning. We have concluded Ayin Beis in the actual text. We're learning now the foundational text upon which this Ayin Beis is based on, and that's the Torah Ohr, the Maimer Mika Hashem Elokeinu. And we learned the first paragraph. It's on page 38b and c. The pages can be found at ayinbeis.com. We scan them, PDFs. This in turn will lead us to Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, which elaborates on this, which in turn is the foundation, as I said, of the Ayin Beis. So what do we learn? Ner Hashem Nishma Sodom. Why the significance of a ner? Made up primarily of a wick. But with the wick comes oil, fuel, that in turn generates a flame, fire. So he explained, both in the Moshel and the Nimshel, that these three elements refers to our Avodah, Ner Hashem Nishma Sodom, that the Psila is the divine soul, the Ner Hashem, the divine soul as it manifests in a body, in the animal soul down below. The Shemen is referring to the Chachma. The Shemen is referring to the animal soul's fuel, energy, which the Avodah of the Nefesh Elokis is to impress upon the animal soul that instead of following its own interests, like we said, the Seichel of Nefesh Abamis is interested in the material world, self-preservation, and the divine soul through his bonus of Shema and Baruch Shem, of recognizing what is the true reality, godliness, that really vivifies and energizes and creates everything, including the animal soul, and everything is nullified compared to him. And he is immutable and is not ever changing. That in turn, that is bonus, that in turn nullifies and tames and ultimately harnesses the animal soul instead of focusing on we'll call it the temporary, the superficial material world, should also be drawn and be aroused and stimulated and ignited to become fuel for the divine fire and the divine love of Ahavtas Hashem Lekecha, which follows Shema and Baruch Shem. So in effect, the psila, the wick of the divine soul, is Hamechaberes Eira Ava. It attaches and connects this passionate love for God, that it should also permeate, it should also saturate, it should also impact the animal soul, to the point that it even adds, because it comes b'yeser seis, becomes even stronger, because remember, the shemen, from a point of view of fuel, is much more fuel than the psila. You know, if you only lit up a wick, it would burn, but it wouldn't burn with the same length of time and the same intensity. Like he said earlier, that's what the fuel does. So the Nefesh Abamis actually turns into becoming a tremendous asset, where the divine soul alone would only be like a wick in this world, and the animal soul fuels it to the point that as it's slowly being consumed, the oil of the animal soul, it becomes nasa mimenu kule eshel er haner, by the tza'ak libam, the cry from the heart, that the animal soul is recognizing its distance and recognizing its you could say dissonance from the divine. This is the meaning of Ner Hashem Nishma Sodom, the flame, the candle of the soul, that created through the divine soul itself, and that's why the posuk is a self-contained posuk. It doesn't say you need anything more. As soon as you have a neshama that's a Ner Hashem, and it's contemplating what it has to do, it will in turn the animal soul into the shemen, into the oil. This is through Nefesh Elikis Atzma. In other words, without the assistance of mitzvahs or Torah, which now we're going to learn about. And we'll see how that plays itself out as well. So now I'm going to continue reading the second paragraph on the Torah Ohr, page 38c, or numbers 76. And now I'm going to talk about what about the Ner Mitzvah The other pasuk says Ner Mitzvah. And like he asked the question at the beginning of the Maimer, what's Ner Mitzvah? Interestingly, this is also a question in Ayin Beis. On page 1466, the two questions that we discussed. One is, a few questions. How do you transform an animal soul when it has self-interest is at its heart? The question, what means Ner Mitzvah? And what are the three things in the mitzvah? In the Ner Mitzvah, you also have a wick and oil and fuel and fire. So he's now going to address that. So essentially, we're getting the answers to the questions that the Ayin Beis asked that didn't answer. However, it's still very bekitzer, very summarized and very concentrated in Torah Ohr. The Mittler Rebbe will elaborate on all of this. So we're really laying the ground like on the level of Chachma, the Alter Rebbe is establishing the key points. Then we're going to see how the Mittler Rebbe fleshes it out. And then we'll go back and see how the Rebbe Rashab takes it all. And it'll also help us understand where the Rebbe Rashab would have most likely gone had he continued writing Ayin Beis. So just giving it again context. So unless someone has to ask something about what I just said, I'm ready to continue learning the Torah Ohr. We'll learn now about Ner Mitzvah. The Inyan Ner Shal Mitzvah, who he what's the Inyan when we say Ner Mitzvah? Just like we say Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, Ner Mitzvah, the candle of the mitzvah. So what's the Inyan of this Ner of the mitzvah? So he starts like this. Shah Mitzvah, the Inyan in this is Shah Mitzvah Yesh Lo Skula Krotis. A mitzvah has a unique feature, a unique quality. I know the word Zgula sometimes is used like a amulet or a. That's not what it means here. Skula means a property. It has the properties, has the unique property. Skula pratis, a specific property or feature or strength even. Lahalis is a nefesh habamis, to elevate the animal soul. So though we learned that the divine soul through its contemplation can affect the animal soul, but now he's adding what a mitzvah does. It has a unique power, a unique feature to elevate the animal soul, ulakashra be'erein sof baruch hu, and to bind it with erein sof. I know the immediate question is, what do you need the mitzvah if the neshama can do it? We're going to get there, obviously. He's going to discuss it. That's the whole theme here. But he's starting, what is a mitzvah? So whatever the mitzvah is, every mitzvah, all the mitzvahs here, he's not saying which mitzvah, he just says mitzvah, meaning it's referring to all mitzvahs. And that's why a mitzvah, indeed, one of the reasons it's called mitzvah from Lashon Tzavsa v'chibur, not commandment, from the word binding. What's it binding? What is a mitzvah connecting? So one of the things it's connecting, lahalis or lekashra, is binding the animal soul to Erein Sof. In other words, the animal soul on its own has its interest. The mitzvah helps bind, helps harness, and connect the animal soul to Erein Sof Baruch. Kamaimer. Maimer here is referring to the language of the bracha. When we make a bracha on the mitzvahs, we say Asher Kedishanu b'mitzveisav. That's the acronym Aleph Kuf Beis. What does that say? We're saying Asher Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Ha'olam. Blessed is God, King of the universe. Asher Kedishanu b'mitzveisav, who sanctifies us with His mitzvahs. What does that mean exactly? So if you think about it, it means exactly what he's saying here. That with mitzvahs, the Eibishter gave us a tool, His instruments, to sanctify us with the mitzvahs, which includes sanctifying the animal soul. And what's the Kodesh? Asher Kedishanu. What would we be like without it? We would be more on a mundane level. So in other words, the mitzvahs bring a kedusha into our lives. Asher Kedishanu, you sanctifies us b'mitzvahs with His mitzvahs. And then it says, what mitzvah? Lahadlik Ner Chanukah, Laniach Tefillin, etc. So he's saying that Kedishanu is the level that he is, Asher Kedishanu, B'Kedesh HaElyon, in the supernal level of Kedusha, of the Kedusha of God. Like when we say, Kedeshim Tiyu, you shall sanctify yourself. Ki Kodesh Ani, because I'm sanctified. Now, as Rashi says, sanctified means, what means something is holy? It means it's separate. It's over and beyond. It's not a regular thing. The mundane world, chayil versus kodesh, when we say ben kodesh lachayil, chayil was also created by God, obviously. But when we say regular, it's not regular as in regular. It means it's not particularly sparkling and shining with a particular refinement, a particular holiness. When you sanctify something, you take a cloth, let's say, take animal hide, and you turn it into parchment. And then a sefer sanctifies it with all the kavanas and all the intentions by writing stam, sefer Torah, tefillin, mezuzah on the parchment. You've taken a physical object called chayil, the mundane, and you've sanctified it. The way Hashem said you should do, you can take the material world and sanctify it. So mitzvah does that. The Kedush Elyon, you're sanctifying with the Kedusha Elyon, the supernal Kedusha from above, Shulamayla min Eishtalshlus. That's higher than the cosmic order. The cosmic Eishtalshlus is the structure, the way it was created. Reisha is bara l'kim shemayim v'saaretz. He created a world, heaven and earth, the sky, the upper waters, the lower waters, the heavens, the vegetation, of everything in creation. At this point, it's a divine creation. It's God's product, but it's not been sanctified yet. Then comes Adam and Chava into Garden of Eden, and Hashem says here, "La'avda l'shamra," to serve and to protect. As we know, that means la'avda with the 248 positive mitzvahs, l'shamra to protect with the 365 negative mitzvahs, and they sanctify the earth. It's a whole different level now. They're revealing the divine that's concealed in everything in existence. That's what a mitzvah does. So Asher Kedushan mitzvah the Kedush Elyon, Shulamayla Mishalshus. Kedusha, as I said, is Havdalah, removed. You've elevated. When Hashem says Shabbos Kedush, Ben Shabbos Im Hashvil Sheish Yimei Ma'aseh, Hamavdil Ben Kedush Lachel, Ben Im Hashvil Sheish Yimei Ma'aseh, Ben Erev Cheshach. All these things is Kedusha, meaning you're elevating. When the Eibishter chose the Jewish people of Matan Torah, he was Mekadesh them. Actually, it says V'atem Tiyali Zgula. It says Mamleches Kainim V'Gei Kodesh. A great Kodesh, not just a nation, a sacred nation, a holy nation. Holiness means it's not about you. In Tanya Perek Lov, he says it so powerfully. He says, "What's kedusha? Anything that's batul telekus. If it's not batul telekus, it can't be kedusha. It means it can't be self-consumed. If it's about me, it's not kedusha. That doesn't mean you have to be annihilated. It means you're aligning yourself to serve Hashem. So that makes you into a holy entity, because then you're expressing and channeling divine holiness into this world. We use the word kedusha so often and holy. Sometimes you have to just pause and step back and just translate what that means. So recently, I remember a few bochum in yeshiva, little chassidus, they said, "What does kedusha mean?" It's interesting because we use it so common. Kedushanu b'mitzvah of kodesh b'mavdil ben kedush lachel. So I said in simple English, it means to refine yourself. They say, yeah, but that could be refined. You can refine yourself as a person. What does it have to do with Yiddishkeit, Torah mitzvahs? So first of all, refining yourself as a person is also part of Torah mitzvahs. The Torah mitzvahs was given to refine, like the Alter Rebbe says, that should be nafshe ikiv v'guf itofel, that the soul should be primary and the body secondary. So there's chul and altaras hakedesh, even neutral things like rishus. You eat l'shem shemayim, you're also mekadesh. It's not the kedusha of a mitzvah like tefillin or mezuzah or sefer Torah and so on, but any form of taking something, a mundane, raw entity that on its own is just driven by its own survival and existence, and turning it l'kveidish shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and recognizing that it is not a self-contained entity, it's here to honor God, to bring godliness, to bring refinement, to bring beauty into this world. In the broad sense of the word, that's you are Mekadesh, that experience or that object, like a Kiddush Hashem. Kiddush Hashem doesn't always mean a pure mitzvah. The fact that you behave like a mensch, someone sees. that you behave, a person who looks like a godly person, a Jewish person, behaves with respect and shows humility and so on, it's called a Kiddush Hashem. You're sanctifying God in a very mundane way, sitting on an airplane, walking in the street, regular talking and communicating and doing business and all of that. Just driving the point home. So what you're doing is, in the Ishtalshelus, you're introducing something l'mayla mishtalshelus. That's Kedusha. And that's what mitzvahs do. They have that is gula lahalis. So nefesh habam is l'kashra bein himself. Why does he say nefesh habam? Because obviously we're talking about the animal soul. And the animal soul personifies essentially all our self-interest driven behavior. Well, we'll see how he develops this. But that's his first opening statement. I mean, just this alone, when I read it, it's so exciting because see how the Alter Rebbe, a master of all masters, takes simple things like mitzvah, kedusha, ner mitzvah, and the pasuk suddenly comes alive in a whole new way by understanding the deeper meaning. It's the real pnimius, the real neshama of something you can read and be you can be impressed by its depth or its meaning, but this is a whole different level of relating to it personally. Now he's going to explain why does a mitzvah have this skula. But let me stop if anybody wants to ask anything. He says now like this: why do mitzvahs? What makes a mitzvah this way? So he says, "Ki mitzvahs heim levushim." The mitzvahs are the level. It's called levushim, garments. Actually, in Tanya, it's elaborated upon that Torah is more teirashcha b'seichmei. When you understand Torah, it's more internalized, like food. Mazon. Mitzvah, you don't digest a mitzvah. Mitzvah is like garments. Putting on princely or kingly garments. V'nikroim, mitzvahs are called levush malchus. King's garment, levush malchus. The king's garment, the majestic garments. So in other words, you could be dressed, let's take a physical example. You could be dressed like a decent way, but you're a lay person. You're a person of the world. The Eibishter says, no, I'm giving you my mitzvahs. You put them on. You wear them. There are mitzvahs mamish like that. Tefillin is like that. Talis is actually going to use those examples here. Those are mamish levushim. But even mitzvahs that are not levushim in the physical sense, but they become garments that you are surrounding your life and you're dressing up. So even though your body is who you are, but on an expressive level, on a revealed level, it's the garments. That's why machshava, dibur, and maisa are called garments, because that's how we express ourselves. You could have a brilliant mind, chachma, bina, das, chesed, gvura, teferes, netzach, yesed, malchus. But if it's not expressed in a refined way in thought, speech, and action, it remains like a clean body in either no garments or dirty garments, soiled garments. So even though the garment is not the etzem of who you are, but it's the way you express yourself in this world. So mitzvahs give us the garments to behave and to speak and to think the way Hashem wants us to be. So that's why he's calling them levushim. It's called levushim malchus. Shehem chinas makifim. A levush is a level of makifim, not a pnimi. Like I said, Torah would be called pnimi. You're learning it, you're internalizing it. A mitzvah, you don't have to internalize, even though there's kavanah and so on. But the actual performance of a mitzvah is more of surrounding you, like a king wearing kingly garments. Shemakifim malbishim es hanefesh. The word surround is not really the word we know. Makif doesn't mean surround. It means transcends, it hovers, it's beyond the pnimi. Umalbishim es hanefesh. They dress up the nefesh. They give the nefesh expression, like we see in the Torah, the big day kahuna. It's a whole thing, big day kahuna. You could say, what difference does it make what they wear? It's who they are, what they do. But it's not the way. The garments of the kohen, It's a whole mitzvah. How to make the garments that should be l'kavod, because in this physical world, outer expression matters. Obviously, only begodim without a pnimius is just superficial and it can be completely surface level. But on the other hand, a pnimius, like a person say, I'm a good Jew at heart. No, it means that from the heart it comes into expression. I never tell you I love you, but I know I love you. Oh, you have to say it. You have to act on it. It has to permeate, because in this world, we do live in a world. That's why mitzvahs, for example, what's the idea? Creates choder, that the actual physical esrog has to be beautiful. Or we beautify mitzvahs. A beautiful sefer Torah, a beautiful shul, a beautiful Aron Kodesh, a beautiful sefer, a beautiful mezuzah. You can say, what do you mean? The mitzvah itself, it's a mezuzah. Who cares how beautiful? Because you also want it to be beautiful in the eyes of this world. In other words, you want the panemius to come out b'chitzenius. Obviously, if it's only beautiful on the outside, like I said, and not inside, we know what that means. Now, when the Rebbe said, for example, when that the former beauty queen of Eretz Yisrael, of Israel, went by the dollars. She said that she was a former beauty queen. Now she's looking for a shidduch. The Rebbe gave her a bracha, and then he called her back, as was the Rebbe's custom so often, and said, on his own, not due to a question, that when it says, Sheker achein vehevel hayefi, kim yiras isha yiras Hashem hitisalo, we say every Friday night, Eishes Chayil. So what do you say? We say false is grace, hevel hayefi, and empty and hollow is beauty. And what we truly praise is the isha yiras Hashem, a woman who's reverence for God. So the Rebbe said, when it says that, the pasuk isn't saying that yefi, beauty, and chen is meaningless. It says without the yiras Hashem, it's just surface, superficial. But with the yiras Hashem, it also permeates. That's why you find, I'm adding, you find in the Torah that when you talk about the imahas, the matriarchs, say yefas teyar, yefas mara, they look beautiful. That doesn't just mean beruchnius, their personality. It also means physically. Because physical beauty that's pleasant to the eye, Chassidus explains, is like tiferes. Tiferes tiferes means that it looks beautiful. So it's not just an inside thing. You're then expressing the beauty, the spiritual beauty in physical form. So beauty represents harmony. Beauty is pleasant to people. Why? Because things fit in a beautiful face. If it was just that, there's one thing. But if it's an inner beauty shining to the outer beauty, your chachmas adam teir panov, the wisdom of a person shines, an aura. You see an aura on that person's face. Just explaining a bit with this inyan of levushim. There's actually an fascinating mimer from the Alter Rebbe that the Rebbe reviewed and explained back in the early 60s, 60 Tavshech Chav Beis or Chav Gimel or Chav Aleph. Those years, where he talks about levushim, that even though they seem to be an outer level, they're actually rooted in the deepest levels. In Tanya, he more or less says, not as much as that, but he says that too, that the levushim in some ways is even deeper than the nefesh ruach neshama of the neshama, the root of the levushim. But that's not so relevant to go into here. Just wanted to make clear that even though it sounds like makif and outer, no, mitzvahs are called levushim, and makif is of course higher than ishtalshalos. Pnimi is within ishtalshalos. Makif is lamayla. Umalbishim es hanefesh mereisha v'adragla. So just like physical garments, they dress up the person from head to toe, or head to leg, reish adragla. That the same thing with mitzvahs. They completely encompass you. That the person should be bound in the bind of life. So the mitzvahs essentially, like garments, completely encompass you to be bound to Tzedach as Hashem Mamish, the bind of life of God Himself Mamish. And through this, Milas HaNefesh, he elevates and refines and elevates the nefesh. That's what the levushim of the mitzvahs do. K'may ha'adam kishu levush, kishu lavush, yichein lahamshech esei alidei levushay. So Alter Rebbe actually gives it that when a person who's in the garment, you can draw him, you can hold on to his garment and pull him. So the garment becomes like a handle that allows you to draw something. So he's saying the same thing as the levushim are milas hanefesh. You could say the levush is only an external garment. No, but through a levush, you can actually draw the person. So the same thing, the levushim of mitzvahs draw the nefesh to a higher level. It literally means that. In other words, let's say a person, I think there's a story of the Frierdiker Rebbe, I'm trying to remember. There's someone at a Fabrengen. It was a very passionate Fabrengen. And the guy started like edging himself out. He was going home or whatever. And the Frierdiker Rebbe was in that state. And he grabbed his sleeve and pulled him to, said, stay here. Now, he didn't have a sleeve. It would have been harder to do that. Now, obviously, we're not talking about forcing anyone. It just means that a levush also serves as a role that you could actually draw someone. Like you'll see, people dress up a certain way. It's presentable. It's respectful. There's certain garments you wear. You could say it's only a garment, but it's not. You see someone goes into a business meeting dressed properly, they'll attract more attention. They'll get more, they could have more influence, more respect. Say it's only a garment because a garment has an effect on people and it draws. In this case, we're talking about the nefesh, the levush of the person himself, which is drawing the nefesh to a higher place. So he's explaining how levushim shouldn't be just seen as external. Levushim actually milas hanefesh. I recall, I think the Mittler Rebbe in his Maimer on this elaborates on this more. So we'll see what he says. Now remember, the Rebbe Rashab may have written all of this, but he never got back to the Ner Mitzvah in Ayin Beis, so we don't know what he would have written. But this is clearly part of the whole process of understanding Ner Mitzvah. Any questions before I continue?
Is it possible to assume that, let's say, our internal appearance, our apartment, our house, our clothes, it's also a kind of expression of Tiferes, if it's nice and beautiful?
Absolutely. There's a concept that says in Gemara, Dira Noah Marchiva Daita Shalodam. A beautiful home expands the mind of a person. Absolutely. Look, the fact is, you come into your home and it looks like a mess. It probably usually frustrates us, more than frustrates, it's irritating. A home that's a beautiful home, you come Shabbos, table is set, everything's beautiful. There's effect. It affects us directly. We know. Now, you could say it's external stimulation, or you could say, no, it's because the inner beauty has expressed itself on an outer level. There's that element. There's you see, like I remember a journalist came to see the Rebbe, came for Shabbos, and he just saw the Rebbe walk in, and then he wrote an article. He says you have to see the regal stature, how he walks, like a king, that. So sometimes the externals definitely are elevate us and affect us. What we don't want is only external, only superficial. But you really want, the word in Hebrew for ponim is both means the face of it and the inside, panemius. In English, when you say surface, the face of it, on the face of it, you're actually saying only on the surface. We don't know what's going on beneath. But in Yiddishkeit, in Torah, Teiche Kidbare means the Gemara talks about students, that their outer and their inner were seamless. Not like a hypocrite or a echad b'peh, echad b'lev, someone that's duplicitous. Or as the Indians would say, white man speaks with forked tongue. You say one thing, you mean something else. You smile to someone and then you're ready to, God forbid, stab them in the back. In Yiddishkeit, the word for outer is the same as the word for inner. Interesting. Where, as I said, in the world, you could say on the surface level, it looks like that. But when you dig deeper, it's not necessarily that way. So yes, absolutely. The outer, that's why I mentioned that the Big Day Kahuna, the garments of the priests, priestly garments, or the Beis Hamikdash itself was meant to be built, like the Rambam writes, that when you do a mitzvah, you should do it min hamufchar, choose the best. That was actually the sin of Cain and Hevel. Hevel took the best, Cain gave more of an offering that was not the best. In other words, choosing the best, the first fruit, is always the idea of beautifying yourself, beautifying mitzvahs and so on. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Now the next line, he gives another example, the example of a sling. And when you want to shoot a, let's say a stone, and with more intense power, you need to have a lavush. The lavush is called a sling. And that's the next lashon that he's going to do. I just want to look up the source for this. 1 second. You don't mind? Give me a moment. I think I saw it. Almost sure it's in Mishlei. I thought it. Okay. So here's the lashon. Kitzroid Evan b'margemo. So that literally means like the throwing of a stone in a sling. Like we took is what do they call them? It's a sling, right? Isn't that what it's called?
Slingshot. Sling is fine. A sling is short.
Yeah,
but
slingshot. A slingshot. Correct. Slingshot. That's correct. 1 second. Let me just see something here. Yeah, slingshot. Like, the famous example with David HaMelech. Let me see something. I just want to see how it's translated. It's in Mishlei 26:8, Chavav Ches. Actually, yeah. Binding a stone in a slingshot. Kitzrer. Remember, he used the word tzrer before, to bind. Kitzrer hachayim. So now he's saying this idea that a garment can elevate a soul to a higher level. He says, "V'chein kitzrer even b'margema," which means to bind a stone in a slingshot. Yeah. The full expression, he who gives honor to a fool is like binding a stone in a slingshot. So it's actually used in a negative way. But the point is that a stone in a slingshot, the garment, can shoot the stone far farther than it would go on its own. Here he goes, he explains. By binding it in the sling, in the pocket, so to speak, of the sling, you're able to throw it much higher because of the additional power. So lavush, you see from this, can serve like a springboard to catapult, in the case of mitzvahs, the nefesh to a far higher level than it would go on its own. Now you already see from this that he's already hinting to Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, he said, was nefesh alikis atzma, on its own. A mitzvah can catapult it completely another level. But we'll get to that. Meanwhile, he's still explaining what mitzvahs are. Haklal. So he's saying now, so haklal, what's the bottom line? Klal means, it's like a way of saying, okay, so what do we take away from all this? What's the takeaway? What's the summary? The summation? Shekol b'chinas makif hu halal lamayla. That every level of makif, like we're talking here, levushim, is halal lamayla. It elevates something to a higher place. Like we've been discussing what the Kiddushanim b'mitzvahs and what mitzvahs do. Okay. Now let me stop here if anybody wants to ask anything. Let's start with that.
It's just
interesting. Haklal, I don't have the Sefer in front of me. Haklal is the Lashon of the Alter Rebbe.
Is the lotion of the maniach, the maril, but it's very likely the Alter Rebbe may have said. I know you don't see it often. It's usually slang, like you hear people speaking. They say haklal, like bottom line or the punchline. But he says it could be the Alter Rebbe actually said it, or the maril understood. The Alter Rebbe may have said in Yiddish. Or the maskani is, or the what's the nekuda. Atamsis, you can't know what. I can't tell you for sure. I wasn't there. I mean, the Rebbe used the word haklal a few times, so I could see the Alter Rebbe saying haklal, but we'll never know because he spoke in Yiddish. So, it's a nice expression. Haklal also means actually, if you're not going to use slang, it means the klal. So, what's the rule? Essentially, what's the central rule here? You use it like that.
I'm sorry,
like in Tanya, he does use in Perik Tazayin, klal gadol. So you could also say a klal does. We use it in pedestrian language more like a klal. But it could say a klal also as a klal. That this is like a rule, a principle, I should say. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah. How are you translating cheret in the preceding sentence? I didn't. It's like a pencil or a stylus.
Cheret is usually like a chrita, like a what's a chrita? A
chisel.
Like engraving. Like no, I wanted to say something else. Like the noun. When you make like an alcove in a stone, you chisel out the stone.
Chisel.
Yeah. Well, chisel.
A chisel.
Maybe. So maybe chisel. But
here,
how
are you translating?
Here, I use the word pocket because cheret probably means like sounds to me, since he's using the slingshot, so where's there a cheret in a slingshot? So it sounds to me it's like putting the stone in the crevice, if you wish, of the maybe crevice.
I see.
I think that's what he means.
Like the pocket or something, or
that's why I said pocket. That's what I meant. So crevice. We learned about crevice by Moshe Rabbeinu that Eibishter put him into what was the lashon there, but say in Pashke Sisa. They didn't use cheret there. I don't think he used cheret there. I mean, you guys know Hebrew better, huh?
Yeah. No. I don't want to interrupt you. Go ahead.
I think that's what he means here. I mean, what do you think, Rav Shlomo? He says it's sarur b'charet zerkenes lamayla. You have to say, because he's not going away from the mashal, he's still talking about a slingshot. So that you have to say something like that. Yeah.
Well, is he saying that there's something about a mitzvah that like the nature of a slingshot is to leverage the force into a much more powerful conversion into it just amplifies the energy of your arm, right? That's what the whole nature of a sling is, that you amplify your own strength by whatever, you throw it and you get, I don't understand the physics of it, but you get the torque, the additional force, and so you can throw it much harder and further with a sling than you can with your own arm. That's what he
obvious.
Seems to be saying.
Of course, that's what he's saying. I thought we're talking about the word cheret.
We are, but I'm trying to relate that word to the concept that he's trying to convey.
So I said, that's how I explained it. You put the stone on its own can only go that far. The slingshot serves like the levush that can thrust it a lot further. So he's saying when you put the stone in the crevice of the sling, that causes it to go much higher. L'mayliation. That's exactly how I translate.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I didn't say you mistranslated. I was trying to understand it better.
That's all it's what I said before. Yeah, that's the whole point here. That slingshot like a levush. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
So bottom line is, like it says, a klal that the makif, shkobchinis makif, is halal lamaylo, which is also going to be relevant in the context of halal mamat lamayla mamayla lamat. Keep that in mind. Right now, he means that it thrusts it to another level. So a mitzvah adds that element. I'm going to stop here. He's now going to continue. He's going to explain why, therefore, we wear a garment of talis and tefillin before we start davening, because the levush of the talis and tefillin is going to thrust and elevate the tefillah to another place. So he's going to spell it out in more detail. So again, this is all very concentrated in a summarized fashion, the Alter Rebbe style, which will be fleshed out. But we are now going into Ner Mitzvah territory, and then we'll go back to Ner Neshama, Torah Ohr, and then back to Neshama. What each one does, as I said, will all help us understand the full picture of Ayin Beis, which is all about the Ner of the Neshama, Yichud Elah Yichud Tata, the Yichud of them, and ultimately the Hafta of the Nefesh Habamis, and what role mitzvahs and Torah play in all of this, in addition to Tefillah. So we'll get there. I'll stop here. So we're down here by the line. Okay, a little more than 2/3 down the page approximately.